All right, so we're going to go ahead and continue with Catholic social teaching, theme number 1, which is life and dignity of the human person. We already went ahead and covered capital punishment, physician-assisted suicide, and euthanasia, but now we're going to go ahead and cover the other topic in that category. There are others, but we're now going to consider the issue of abortion. Our primary objective is, of course, to figure out what is at stake morally and ethically speaking with respect to this particular issue. Technically speaking, abortion is the termination of pregnancy, pre-delivery. Just to kick us off with a statistic, there have been approximately 61 million since 1973 in the United States. To put things into further statistical context, in 2017, approximately 18%, that's just under 1 out of 5 pregnancies ended in abortion procedures. The year later, in New York City, they determined that around just under 1 out of 3 pregnancies ended in abortion, okay? And then the last statistic is sort of a general overview of when abortion procedures occur with respect to gestational age of the fetus, all right? There are, generally speaking, 2 important groups that track abortion statistics. That would be the CDC and the Guttmacher Institute, all right? One of the surveys that they published was in 2004 with 1,200 women who underwent abortions, okay? And they were asked why they chose, and so they provided their main reasons. You can see at the top of the list, victim of rape, fetal health problems, and physical health problems constitute about 7.5%, all right? And then you see 4% that said would interfere with education or career, 7% said not mature enough to raise a child, 8% said don't want to be a single mother, 19% said done having children, 23% said can't afford a baby, and 25% said not ready for another child or for a child, okay? And then 6% were other, all right? So you can see there's sort of a range of reasons given for procuring an abortion, and that's sort of, it's a small population that they are drawing from, but it's representative nonetheless, okay? Down here, you can see the field showing where, or sort of when abortional procedures take place, and the gestational age of a fetus. So the majority occur when the fetus is 6 weeks or younger. If you go a week or 2 out of that, another 37%. So before week 10, you have a majority of abortion procedures taking place, about 78%. If you add what is 10 to 13 weeks, about 92% take place before week 14. Where are abortions occurring? It is, generally speaking, it's very difficult to obtain abortion statistics and data. It's a private surgical procedure, generally speaking, and it's sort of difficult to come by data. But one of the best places for abortion statistics to look is where abortions are performed, and that would be Planned Parenthood. So they keep a very meticulous record of things, and they share that with the CDC and so forth, okay? Looking at this graph, which country performs the most abortions annually? China does, right. So you can see a break here in the graph. It goes from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and then 2 to 9. So just from this perspective, China has just over 9 million abortions every year. That's highly probably conservative. There are estimates from the UN and other major sort of bodies of statistics that suggest in the last 75 years, just between China and Russia, there have been 300 to 600 million abortions. Okay, And so you're looking at just shy of 1 billion, looking in the last 75 years in Europe and in the West alone. Okay. Um, Annually speaking, in the United States, you've got just over 1 million. Okay, about the same as the Russian Federation. Then you have what is called International Planned Parenthood Federation, okay? And then you have what Planned Parenthood USA is responsible for, okay? Generally speaking, Planned Parenthood USA is responsible for about 40 to 50% of abortions procured in this country. The remaining are in private or unaffiliated clinics, okay? Just a couple of things about Planned Parenthood, since it does perform so many. I wanted to look sort of to who their founder is and sort of what was going on with that. Perhaps you've heard of Margaret Sanger. She is an interesting person. I took 2 screenshots from a PDF of Planned Parenthood this morning, so these come from it. These are not old slides, they're just screenshots from today from the website and a PDF that they published. I'll read it to you just a little bit, all right? Margaret Sanger was a woman of heroic accomplishments, and like all heroes, she was also complex and imperfect. It is undeniable that Margaret Sanger's lifelong struggle helped 20th century women gain the right to decide when and whether to have a child, a right that had been suppressed worldwide for at least 5,000 years. Okay, so just a couple things to note about this. Margaret Sanger is a birth control activist. Okay, she has died long ago, but she was a birth control activist in the early 20th century. All right. This article also claims that the right for women to decide when to have children has been suppressed for at least 5,000 years. One of the things I wanted to say about that is I can't corroborate that historically speaking at all. I'm not a historian per se. But what I will say is that sometimes I think we all are under the delusion that abortion is a modern invention. Abortion has been around since pregnancy has been around, okay? And men and women, when faced with an undesired pregnancy, have tried to terminate that pregnancy in myriad and primitive ways. So abortion is now very much a medical procedure. It's scientific, so to speak, but it's been around for a long time, okay? Now, what does the article mean when it says Margaret Sanger was an imperfect hero or heroine? What does it mean? What are they getting at? Well, if we look on the right here, which is also from page 7 of the PDF published by Planned Parenthood, it says this: Margaret Sanger, during her time in the 20s, aligned herself very closely with the American eugenics movement. Now, what is eugenics? You probably already know, but allow me to read it to you. Eugenics is the science of improving society through planned breeding, a theory accepted by most American scientists and physicians. I disagree with the word most, okay? But there you have it. Eugenics was embraced across the political spectrum from conservatives to socialists. So much was it embraced that it was taught in universities. I continue. As their most basic belief, eugenicists held that careful breeding could improve the human race by limiting population growth and by reducing the frequency of undesirable genetic attributes, such as hereditary diseases. At their most malicious, eugenicists held that forced breeding or sterilization could either increase or decrease certain ethnic populations. In the 1920s, many eugenicists, who were largely white, applied their theory in racist fashion, falsely assuming that many ethnic groups were biologically inferior. 14 years later, Sanger, after being called a racist, tries to clarify her position and says this, and this is a very chilling quotation. Pay attention. I admire the courage of a government that takes a stand on sterilization of the unfit. And second, my admiration is subject to interpretation of the word unfit. If by unfit is meant the physical, the physical or mental defects of a human being, that is an admirable gesture. But if unfit refers to races or religions, that is another matter, which I frankly deplore. So it takes some time for Sanger to clarify her position. It is nevertheless a very difficult one to hold, even the not or the anti-racist aspects of it. There are many ways to parse out the issue of abortion, okay? I'd like to pursue this particular route, and I'd like to divide the issue into two perspectives. So we have to look at two things. We have to look at the status of the fetus, which is just to say, what is it? Is it a person? Is it a human being? What is it? Okay? And then we have to talk about this particular fetus's rights and also the rights of the mother. And we're going to use three groups to talk about that, all right? So the first one is Peter Singer. We've all remember Peter Singer, right, and his definition of a person. And he seems to recall that a human being is divided into Homo sapiens and persons. Persons are Homo sapiens with a self-consciousness, self-awareness, an ability to relate, things like that. But babies in the womb or in utero, any young children under the age of 2, or children who have what he calls severe intellectual disabilities, do not have any kind of person about them. They don't have the state of personhood, okay? Next person, Teresa Forcades. Teresa Forcades is a Benedictine nun from Spain. She also happens to be a doctor, trained in University of Barcelona, University of Buffalo in New York, and Harvard. And she speaks around the world on various medical issues, and others to be sure, but she talks a lot about medical ethics and issues. She happens to think that the fetus is a person with a will. She thinks the fetus is a person with a will. Okay, we'll return to her in a minute. And then finally, Christian tradition. Christian tradition has not always agreed about what the nature of a fetus is with respect to its identity. Thomas Aquinas doesn't seem to think a fetus is a person. He thinks it begins first as a vegetative soul, then as a kind of animal soul, and then in a third, unclear stage of development becomes rational or becomes personal. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the rights with respect to this fetus, person, or rational being. Peter Singer, remember, doesn't think the fetus is a person, and also on his view, he thinks, therefore, if a parent decides to terminate a pregnancy or kill an intellectually disabled child, that is okay. It is ethically permissible. And so Peter Singer is a proponent, in rare cases, of infanticide. We're going to go ahead and skip Kant, okay? Number 3, or in our case, number 2, Sister Dr. Teresa Forcades thinks that the fetus is a person. However, the mother also has a will. And so if it is the mother's will that the fetus should continue to exist and become a fully fledged adult, well, great. However, if the mother thinks or wills that the fetus not come to delivery, that is also okay. Because when two wills come into conflict and it affects the mother's body, she thinks the stronger will is able to take the lead and then determine the ultimate outcome. Again, Sister Forcadis, Dr. Forcadis, is, in layman's terms, pro-choice. She thinks if it's the mother's will for the fetus to continue existing, great. There you have a baby and you become a kid, an adult, all that. However, if the mother's will comes into conflict with the fetus's will to exist, she, because she is owner of her own body, is perfectly capable of procuring an abortion procedure. Ethically permissible. Christian tradition. I said Christian tradition hasn't always understood the fetus as a person. It's always been considering what exactly to call what transpires from conception. You have the zygote, and then the 4 cells, you have the blastula, then you have the embryo, and then you have ostensibly very clearly a baby, human baby. However, Christian tradition since the very beginning, like with the opinion of the Jews, has always been a defender of the fetus's life. Even, I showed you this last semester when we read parts of the Didache, which was written in the 2nd century. As early as 110, the Christians knew or professed to be, again for layman's perspectives, pro-life. So, despite their tenuous grasp at the definition of a fetus as a person or as a human being or as a creation, all those things, the church, Christian tradition, has always affirmed a right to life for the creation of 2 people. Because again, remember, abortion's a very, very old idea. So here you have 3 people or 2 people in one group with different understandings of what the fetus is. Is it a person? No. Is it a person? Yes. Is it a person? Maybe. And the rights applied. Is it a person? No. Singer says, therefore, no right to life. Is it a person? For Teresa Forcadis, yes. Is there a right to life? Yes. Unless the mother's will chooses to conflict with that fetus's will. In the Christian tradition, is it a person? Well, we didn't know back then. Now we think it is. Is there still a right to life regardless? Yes. 3 different opinions. 3 different opinions. On an old issue. Questions? Yes?
If the sister Teresa is pro-choice, how is she still a sister?
Sometimes religious have conflicting opinions with Mother Church.
But then wouldn't she just get excommunicated from the church for stopping
It's unclear how much she has been asked to reassess her views, but she has been asked to reassess her views, yes.
But she's still like a pro-choice though, right?
There are technically religious who dissent with the church on this issue. I guess I should take an opportunity here to clarify. I'm not presenting Sister Forcadis' position as viable in the church. I'm merely trying to show there are multiple perspectives about personhood and the rights to personhood. The Christian tradition is clear about what the body of Christ holds with regard to life. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Are you not going to go over Kant?
I didn't want to confuse everybody with Kant, but Kant, remember, if you ask, that's fine. Kant was someone who was not religious particularly. He wanted to avoid religious thinking for his ethical system. He's actually very anti-abortion. Why? Why do you think?
It's not universally good. for whatever reason.
It's not universally good. He would see it as the termination of an innocent as always ubiquitously bad or wrong. Yep. I just didn't want to confuse everybody, but for Kant as well, he says no. Without regard to the situation either. Okay. So everybody at home, you're free to go. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.